Episode 65. The small animals scurry with hunger. Are you thirsty and hungry? I am. Greetings and welcome into the Pawtuxet General. Was last week a little gross? Well, this week is as comforting and delicious as I can make it. Let your mind, nose, and ears wrap around this, the ultimate lasagna. And it ain't easy, but it's tasty. The drink this week is so refreshing any time of year. You can't help but adore the lemon shrub. While you sit back and smell your lasagna baking, I hope you enjoy the next installment of The Rats in the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. But first, I really must thank our Patreon subscribers. These springtime folk are the fresh yellow daffodils, deep purple crocus, lamb cakes, and fresh rhubarb that is the Pawtuxet village, without whom we would merely be mulch. If you would like to become one of these symbols of rebirth, simply look up our page on patreon.com or follow the links in the show notes. Every dollar counts. If you have something to add, a recipe or ghost story or such, our email is jess@pawtuxetgeneral.com. But for right now, how about a shrub? This is either a cocktail or a mocktail, depending on how you feel. Make it fresh, it is a brilliant mocktail. Left to ferment, well, that is something else entirely. Shrubs are a very simple recipe. 1 part vinegar, 1 part sugar, 1 part fruit. Diffordsguide.com had this to say. What exactly is a shrub? We're talking about drinks, not bushes, obviously. The two main types of shrub are fruit preserves made with vinegar, usually mixed with soda, and a fruit cordial or liqueur made with alcohol, which is not itself distilled. This article focuses on the latter type. We asked bartender, Hey! Oh, stop! Oh, Jesus! Diffordsguide.com had this to say. What exactly is shrub? We're talking about drinks, not bushes, obviously. The two main types of shrub are fruit preserves made with vinegar, usually mixed with soda, and a fruit cordial or liqueur made with alcohol, but which itself is not distilled. This article focuses on the latter type. We asked bartender Tim Oakley to do the research. Shrub comes from the Arabic word sharaba, which means to drink. The word is also used for syrup and sherbet. The first mention of the word shrub is in the English dictionary in 1747, which defined it as any of various acidulated beverages made from the juice of fruit, sugar, and other ingredients, often alcohol. Shrubs, in the English sense, are a form of cordial, which themselves developed in England from the late 15th century. They became alcoholic medicines used to revitalize the heart, body, spirit, and to cure disease. Shrubs' popularity and growth throughout England was mainly due to the rise in smuggling. Here's a brief history of it. Smuggling developed in England in the 1680s, when there were high taxes on luxury imported goods, such as tea, brandy, rum, and Geneva. Brandy purchased in Europe was a fifth the price in the UK. Cornwall and Devon were particularly suited for smuggling due to their long expanses of rocky, virtually uninhabited coast. Only a few revenue men were on patrol. Initially, smuggling took place fairly openly, with cargoes landing directly on shore. This was made possible by the involvement of all sections of the community, from the local landowner downwards. This ranged from the gentry turning a blind eye to full-scale involvement. It is estimated that each year, 1780s brandy alone was smuggled at the rate of 6 bottles per head. You can see that they would have to make it stretch. And a great way to do that is to make shrub. Here, when the spring is warm, like this year, I've set my sights ahead with a lemon shrub. For this recipe, I'll hit up Mrs. Seeley's cookbook beverage section. I'm going to annotate as we go along because this isn't the way we usually do things. She says, to a pint of the juice of fine fresh lemons, put a pound of sugar. Measure out for each pint of syrup, measure out 3 tablespoons of French brandy, and soak the rinds of the lemons in it. We are talking about 6 really big lemons or a dozen off-season lemons, enough to give you the aforementioned pint of lemon juice. Let the whole remain in for a day, stirring up the lemon juice and sugar frequently. The next day, turn off the syrup and mix it with brandy and lemon rinds. Then, put into clean bottles, cork, and seal tight and keep in a cool place. This can be served over crushed ice, 4 ounces or so, and then topped with soda water for a lovely mocktail. Garnish with strawberries and/or mint or maple candy. It's perfect. For a cocktail, add 3 ounces of vodka of your choice and crushed ice to 2 ounces of shrub and the same garnish, perhaps with fresh basil to really wow 'em. Either way, enjoy. In November 1990, I was staying with family in Germany. Dad decided that it was his and my lovely stepmother's turn to host their elementary school Thanksgiving potluck. A great deal of the American teachers had nowhere to go for Thanksgiving, so the teachers took turns hosting. That year, Dad and I decided to go all out with a Rhode Island-style Thanksgiving. English, Italian, Portuguese, and French influence. We had clams casino and antipasto that took 3 hours to lay out, let alone the picking time, and was so perfect and took up so much space that when the time came, nobody would eat it. It was too pretty. Dad and I had to go at it with tongs and our own selves and mess it up to encourage others to eat. There was fish and chorizo and garlic bread and the main attraction. If you're looking for a good time, look no further. The ultimate lasagna has everything. Sausage, peppers, and onions like an Italian festival. Dad's homemade meatballs like in episode 5. Fried eggplants, and I'm talking bodacious black beauties. No skinning aubergines need apply. If you like vegetables, how about grape tomatoes, zucchini, spinach, onions, and garlic? If you need cheese, we have Romano, mozzarella, ricotta, and Parmesan. But don't go looking for cheddar. It's not invited. The prep for the ultimate lasagna gets broken up into groups and then assembled. Sauce, sausage, fried veggies, cheese, noodles, meatballs, and spinach pie. For the sauce, you will need 1 No. 10 can of Tomato Magic, 4 cloves of garlic, 2 ounces of Italian seasoning, 4 cups of water, 1 onion, a half a pound of fatback, 1 cup of your favorite red wine, and a very large pot. You do not want your kitchen covered with sauce. All right then. Cut your fatback into cubes and place them to melt on a medium-low heat in your sauce pot. When most of the fat has melted, add your finely chopped onion and garlic. Just sauté them until they soften. Be careful not to brown or overcook. It can spoil the whole sauce. If that does happen, start over. You're not too deep to have to start the process over. But let's say it's lovely. Add your wine and let it bubble for 5 minutes. Then your seasonings and tomato magic and water. Simmer very gently for 45 minutes, stirring often. Set aside. Then make the meatballs. We covered these in episode 5, but here's the Cliff Notes version. For the whole story, check out episode 5. But for our purposes, you will need 1 pound of ground hamburger, 1 small onion chopped fine, 1 clove of garlic chopped fine, 1 teaspoon Worcestershire sauce, a half a cup of breadcrumbs, a half a cup of water, 2 eggs, salt and pepper to taste. You will also need a half a cup of frying oil if you're going to fry them. Otherwise, you don't need that if you're going to bake them into the oven. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Take your hands, gloves to make it easier, and mush together all the ingredients at room temperature until fairly well mixed. Beware of overmixing. Shape into tiny 1-inch diameter balls. Roll through flour. Heat a deep skillet, and then add olive oil about halfway up the pot. When hot, gently add the meatballs with a spoon. Brown on each side, only turning when a nice crust has formed. When all sides are done, spoon into a baking dish and bake for half an hour. At that point, you could set those aside and get ready for the next part. The sausage, peppers, and onions get cooked together, giving a special flavor that really brings something to the dish. I use locally made sausage without casings from Sandy Lane Market in Warwick. I use sweet, but you could use hot if that's the way you fly. For the sausage mix, you will need 2 bell peppers, 1 red, 1 green, 2 large onions, 1 pound ground sausage, 2 cloves garlic, well chopped, and 1 deep fry pan. Cast iron would work well. 2 tablespoons of oil. I suggest grapeseed for this. It is neutral with a high smoke temperature. Partially brown the sausage in the oil over medium heat. Then add the well-chopped onions, peppers, and garlic. Cook for about 5 more minutes until the sausage is lightly brown and the vegetables have softened, and then set aside. The eggplants and zucchini will be fried Parmesan style. For this, you will need 1 nice fat black beauty eggplant sliced into 1-inch thick discs. Keep them on paper towels to absorb some of the liquid. 1 good-sized zucchini cut into rounds. 1 to 1.5 cups of oil, your favorite for frying. 4 cups of breadcrumbs. 3 tablespoons Italian seasoning. 3 eggs. 1 cup of flour, salt and pepper. I suggest doing the zucchini first. Eggplant likes to suck up a lot of oil. Put your breadcrumbs, flour, and seasonings into a large shallow container and combine. Then, in another dish, beat your eggs. Designate one hand dry and the other wet. With your wet hand, take a zucchini slice and dip it into the egg and get it all over. Then put it into the crumb mixture and cover it using your dry hand. Using a fork or tongs, place your zucchini into the hot oil. Brown on both sides, then put onto paper towels to drain. We will do the same process to the eggplant rounds and set them aside on paper towels as well to drain. The next part is the cheeses. For the ricotta mixture, you will need 1 large container of ricotta cheese, 3 eggs, 1 cup Parmesan cheese grated, 1 cup Romano cheese grated, 2 tablespoons Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon pepper. Mix together and set aside. You will also need 2 large balls of mozzarella cheese sliced into 1/2-inch slabs. I like a spinach pie in the middle of my lasagna, so I made one. For the spinach filling, you will need 2 tablespoons Knorr veggie base, 1 pound frozen chopped spinach. You could use fresh, but you need 3 pounds, and that would take 3 times as long to cook and frankly not turn out as good because the cell walls of the fresh spinach aren't broken down like freezing can do for them. 3 cups of water, 1 onion chopped fine, 3 cloves garlic chopped fine, 1 tablespoon cracked red pepper, 1 can sliced black olives drained, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon pepper, 1 tablespoon sugar, 3 tablespoons Italian seasoning. Alrighty, are you hanging in there? Pause and refill your drink if you want to. I'll wait right here. Did you enjoy your break? Excellent. In a hot pot, put oil, onions, garlic, cracked red pepper, salt, sugar, pepper, and Italian seasoning. Then, throw in the frozen spinach, the Knorr veggie base, the water, and then finally the black olives. Let it all cook down to a thick green-black paste and set aside. The last ingredient to this epic dish is the pasta. In this case, the lasagna noodles. They come in flat, curly, par-cooked, and raw, not to mention dried, as we see all the time in the grocery. And if you could find semolina flour, you could make your own pasta. If you are in a rush, you might get a bake-in-the-oven noodle. I personally adore these and add 3/4 cup more sauce, tomato juice, or water. Let's say that you boil lasagna noodles from dry, like most of us do. For the actual story, I must admit that Dad and I saved our curly pasta for a month or so, because that was what they had in the commissary on base. We didn't want to take it all, but also wanted enough for the holidays. So we got 1 a week and saved them, as well as the black olives, which were hard to get at the time. So we used curly lasagna noodles. We would set a very large pot, 3/4 of the way full with water to boil. This recipe, made for an extra large party, needs 2 to 2.5 pounds of the 3/4 of the way boiled lasagna noodles. We are going to cook them again, so don't worry. Right off the bat, this recipe is huge. You will need a very large pan. 8 by 23 by 3 would be the best. However, you could cut that in half and do 2 large 4-inch deep half-sheet pans. As many small lasagna pans as you need. But frankly, I'm losing track. This is meant for an army, and you guys are still hungry after last week, right? Great. Gather your pans. Make sure that you have enough room for 6 layers. Put 1 ladleful of sauce at the bottom of each bake dish, then 1 layer of noodle. They should overlap. A thin layer of spinach filling is next, then 1/3 of the mozzarella discs. Then 1 thin layer of the sausage mix. Pour 3 ladles of sauce all around the casserole, then cover with noodles. At this point, put in half the ricotta mixture evenly across the casserole. Then, add the meatballs all across the dish. Each layer gets 4 ladles of sauce to keep moist. then noodles, then fried eggplant and zucchini, then ricotta mix, then sausage mix, then noodles, then 4 ladles of sauce. At this point, if there are any leftover meats, cheeses, vegetables, all get topped with noodles, the rest of the sauce, and the rest of the cheese. At this point, they want to be baked in a 350-degree oven for an hour, half of which they should be covered with parchment and aluminum foil. These should be lightly brown along the edge and a bit bubbly. Let them cool for half to 45 minutes, and then enjoy. I want to tell you about my friend Mike and his electromagnetic pinball museum and restoration arcade. It's an all-inclusive place to relax and share anything related to modern pinball and arcade games. A group of pinball and arcade fans with an addiction to games of all kinds and Lego too. $10 gets you free play on pinball and arcade games all day. You can find them at 881 Main Street, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, or online at www.electromagneticpinballmuseum.com. As part of our House on the Corner series, we bring you the continued reading of The Rats in the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. The worst characters, apparently, were the barons and their direct heirs. At least, most whispered about these. If of healthier inclinations, it was said, an heir would early and mysteriously die to make way for another more typical scion. It seemed to be an inner cult in the family, presided over by the head of the house, and sometimes closed except for few members. Temperament rather than ancestry was evidently the basis for this cult, for it was entered by several who married into the family. Lady Margaret Trevor from Cornwall, wife of Godfrey, and second son to the 5th Baron, became a favorite bane of children all over the countryside, and the demon heroine of a particularly horrible old ballad not yet extinct near the Welsh border. Preserved in balladry too, though not illustrating the same point, is the hideous tale of Lady Mary de Poer. These myths and ballads, typical as they were of crude superstition, repelled me greatly. Their persistence and their application to so long a line of my ancestors was especially annoying, whilst the imputations of monstrous habits proved unpleasantly reminiscent of the one known scandal of my immediate forebears, the case of my cousin, young Randolph Delapour of Carfax, who became a voodoo priest after he returned from the Mexican War. I was much less disturbed by the vaguer tales of wails and howlings in the barren, wind-swept valley beneath the limestone cliff, of the graveyard stenches after the spring rains, of the floundering, squealing white thing on which Sir John Clave's horse had trod one night in the lonely field, and of the servant who had gone mad at what he saw in the priory in the full light of day. These things were hackneyed spectral lore, and I was at that time a pronounced skeptic. The accounts of vanished peasants were less to be dismissed, though not especially significant in view of medieval custom. Prying curiosity meant death, and more than one severed head had been publicly shown on the bastions, now effaced, around the Exham Priory. A few of the tales were exceedingly picturesque, and made me wish that I had learned more of my comparative mythology in my youth. There was, for instance, the belief that a legion of bat-winged devils kept witches' sabbats every night at the priory. A legion whose sustenance might explain the disproportionate abundance of coarse vegetables harvested in the vast gardens. And most vivid of all, there was the dramatic epic of the rats, the scampering army of obscene vermin which had burst forth from the castle 3 months after the tragedy that doomed it to desertion. The lean, filthy, ravenous army which had swept all before it and devoured fowl, cats, dogs, hogs, sheep, and even 2 hapless human beings before the fury was spent. Around that unforgettable rodent army, a whole separate cycle of myths revolves, for it scattered among the village homes and brought curses and horrors in its train. Such was the lore that assailed me as I pushed to completion, with an elderly obstinacy, the work of restoring my ancestral home. It must not be imagined for a moment that these tales formed my principal psychological environment. On the other hand, I was constantly praised and encouraged by Captain Norreys and the antiquarians who surrounded and aided me. When the task was done, over 2 years after its commencement, I viewed the great rooms, wainscoted walls, vaulted ceilings, minioned windows, and broad staircases with a pride which fully compensated for the prodigious expense of the restoration. Every attribute of the Middle Ages was cunningly reproduced, and the new parts blended perfectly with the original walls and foundations. The seat of my fathers was complete, and I looked forward to redeeming at last the local fame of the line which ended in me. I would reside here permanently and prove that a de la Poer, for I had adopted again the original spelling of the name, need not be a fiend. My comfort was perhaps augmented by the fact that, although Exham Priory was medievally fitted, its interior was in truth wholly new and free from old vermin and old ghosts alike. As I have said, I moved in on July 16th, 1923. My household consisted of 7 servants and 9 cats, of which latter species I am particularly fond. My eldest cat was 7 years old and had come with me from my home in Boston, Massachusetts. The others I had accumulated whilst living with Captain Norrie's family during the restoration of the Priory. For 5 days our routine proceeded with the utmost placidity, my time being spent mostly in the codification of old family data. I had now obtained some very circumstantial accounts of the final tragedy and flight of Walter de la Poer, which I had considered to be the probable contents of the hereditary paper lost in the fire at Carfax. It appeared that my ancestor was accused, with much reason, of having killed all the other members of his household, except 4 servant confederates, in their sleep, about 2 weeks after a shocking discovery which changed his whole demeanor, but which, except by implication, he disclosed to no one save perhaps the servants who assisted him and afterward fled beyond reach. This deliberate slaughter, which included a father, 3 brothers, and 2 sisters, was largely condoned by the villagers, and so slackly treated by the law that its perpetrator escaped honored, unharmed, and undisguised to Virginia, the general whispered sentiment being that he had purged the land of an immemorial curse. What discovery had prompted an act so terrible, I could scarcely even conjecture. Walter de la Poer must have known for years the sinister tales about his family, so that this material could have given him no fresh impulse. Had he, then, witnessed some appalling ancient rite? He was reputed to have been a shy, gentle youth in England. In Virginia he seemed not so much hard or bitter as harassed and apprehensive. He was spoken in the diary of another gentleman adventurer, Francis Harley of Bellevue, as a man of unexampled justice, honor, and delicacy. On July 22nd occurred the first incident which, though lightly dismissed at the time, takes on a preternatural significance in relation to later events. It was so simple to be almost negligible, could not possibly have been noticed under the circumstances. For it must be recalled that since I was in the building practically fresh and new except for the walls, and surrounded by a well-balanced staff of servitors, apprehension would have been absurd despite the locality. What I afterward remembered is merely this, that my old black cat, whose moods I knew so well, was undoubtedly alert and anxious to the extent wholly out of keeping with his natural character. He roved from room to room, restless and disturbed, and sniffed constantly about the walls which had formed part of the old Gothic structure. I realize how trite this sounds, like the inevitable dog in the ghost story which always growls before his master sees the sheeted figure, yet I cannot consistently suppress it. The following day a servant complained of restlessness among all the cats in the house. He came to me in my study, a lofty west room on the 2nd story, with groined arches, black oak paneling, and a triple Gothic window overlooking the limestone cliff and desolate valley. And even as I spoke I saw the jetty form of my black cat creeping along the west wall and searching at the new panels which overlaid the ancient stone. I told the man there must be some very singular odor or emanation from the old stonework, imperceivable to human senses, but affecting the delicate organs of cats even through the new woodwork. This I truly believed, and when the fellow suggested the presence of mice or rats, I mentioned that there had been no rats for 300 years, and that even the field mice of the surrounding country could hardly be found in these high walls, where they had never been known to stray. That afternoon I called on Captain Norries, and he assured me it would be quite incredible for field mice to infest a priory in such a sudden and unprecedented fashion. That night, dispensing as usual with a valet, I retired to the West Tower chamber, which I had chosen as my own, reached from the study by a stone staircase and a short gallery, the former partly ancient, the latter entirely restored. This room was circular, very high, and without wainscoting, being hung with arras, which I had chosen myself in London. Seeing the cat was with me, I shut the heavy Gothic door and retired by the light of the electric bulbs which are so cleverly counterfeited candles. Finally switching off the light and sinking into the carved and canopied four-poster, with a venerable cat in his accustomed place across my feet. There was a suspicion of aurora in the sky, and the delicate traceries of the window were pleasantly silhouetted. At some time I must have fallen quietly asleep, for I recall a distinct sense of leaving strange dreams, when the cat started violently from his placid position. I saw him in the faint auroral glow, head strained forward, 4 feet on my ankles and hind feet stretched behind. He looked intently at a point on the wall somewhat west of the window, a point which, to my eye, there was nothing to mark it, but toward now all my attention was directed. And as I watched, I knew the cat was not vainly excited. Whether the auras actually moved, I can't say. I think it did, very slightly, but what I can swear to is that behind it I heard a low, distinct scurrying, as of rats or mice. In a moment the cat had jumped bodily onto the screening tapestry, bringing the affected section to the floor with his weight and exposing a damp ancient wall of stone, patched here and there by restorers and devoid of any trace of rodent prowlers. The black cat raced up and down the floor by this part of the wall, clawing at the fallen arras and seemingly trying at times to insert a paw between the wall and the oaken floor. He found nothing, and after a time returned wearily to his place across my feet. I had not moved, but I did not sleep again that night. Thank you once again for joining us at the PG. If there could possibly be anything you could add to the lasagna, that is the Pawtuxet General, our email is jess@pawtuxetgeneral.com. Reach out if you would like an order for pickup at the pop-up general store, or improve on a recipe. We'd love to hear from you. But until then, I'll meet you right back here next time at the Pawtuxet General. A Something for Posterity production, pre-recorded in Pawtuxet.